Discovery requires serendipity, but serendipity is not a chance event alone. It is a process in which a chance event is seized upon by a creative person who chooses to pay attention to the event, unravel its mystery, and find a proper application for it. Neil, how are you doing this fine Friday afternoon?
Pretty good. I'm excited for this serendipitous episode.
I am. This is a fun book to read. It's light. It's enjoyable. It's kind of funny at times. It's a little bit more easygoing than the somewhat depressing.
I guess in comparison, yeah, that's what I was just gonna say.
In comparison to, I was gonna say like Beginning of Infinity, which was 800 pages of mind bending like physics and pan-disciplinary thinking, and then The War on Normal People, which was like, wow, we're all very fucked. This was fun. It was a nice way to mix it up.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's lighter, but then on the other hand, it's also somewhat critical, not even somewhat, very critical of like how like the medical community and I would say the research community kind of operates on a day-to-day basis. So basically anti-dogma, and this author was really pushing for, in my opinion, what's kind of similar to a lot of the themes that we've talked about on this book, on this podcast. Sorry, a lot of the themes in this book are very similar to themes we've talked about in this podcast. For example, like bottom up as opposed to kind of like a top down methodology. So I thought there were definitely some parallels, but yeah, you're right. It was definitely more optimistic, I would say, than War on Normal People. That's for sure.
Although I guess on the flip side of that, if you went into the book thinking that, the scientific method was a reliable way to discover new things and that we are making, steady, meaningful progress towards solving the world's problems, I think this book would change your perspective away from that belief.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it could be a little bit of a downer, I suppose.
A downer, but it's also like it's mind bending in that way too, because I think the way science is probably portrayed to, well, definitely when you're in school, but also in kind of like in pop culture and kind of like movies and things like that, right? It just is like the scientists are just out there plugging away, spending the hours in the lab and making, as you said, steady progress towards solving all the world's problems. And I think in that way, this book is very, very similar to Beginning of Infinity in the central message, which is kind of like, I remember in Beginning of Infinity, like one of his key points was you kind of need to conjecture to then use the scientific method with, like those two things are kind of, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't really like use the scientific method without first having a hypothesis or without, I mean, it's kind of, there are differences too, because in this book, a lot of the things they talked about were actually, both the accidents and sort of the serendipitous things that led to a lot of these discoveries. But I think both authors would agree that like progress in any field, definitely in medicine, but in probably physics as well, requires, or it doesn't move in a straight line. I think that's probably, it's not a linear thing.
Yeah. And to be clear, the book we're talking about, if you missed it on the title, is Happy Accidents by Morton Meyers, which, as you've probably guessed by now, is sort of an exploration of scientific discovery and progress and how consistently it is influenced and driven by the role of serendipity. So we should probably define serendipity for everyone, because the common usage isn't entirely faithful to, I think, what the author is getting at in the book and what the word actually means. Because I think in sort of modern vernacular, serendipity is kind of just like stumbling over something or being surprised or getting lucky. But what Meyers clarifies in the book is that serendipity, as he's using it, is really a combination of accidents and, is it sagacity? Sagacity?
Yeah, I was going to ask you how to pronounce that.
I haven't actually said that word out loud before, so we should look that up quickly. Sagacity. All right. Solve that mystery. Anyway, it's a combination of accidents and sagacity, right? So it's not just enough to get lucky or have something random happen. You also have to have the sagacity to know what to do with it, which is, as he defines it, like penetrating intelligence, keen perception, and sound judgment, right? You need to not just have these random good things happen. You need to also know how to recognize when they are happening and take advantage of them. Because there's like that great, Churchill quote that men occasionally stumble over the truth, but they quickly like brush themselves off and run off as if, they'd never run into it. It's easy to like discover some of this stuff, but you could completely miss that you have discovered it if you aren't paying attention.
Well, there were so many instances of that.
Yeah.
Which we'll definitely get into, but like the first one that comes to mind for me was like penicillin, where I think Fleming even said that, he was about to throw away a petri dish that he noticed, something strange happening. But then even later on, he mentioned how there probably were thousands of petri dishes thrown away that actually showed the exact same thing,
right,
as the one which led to the discovery of penicillin,
or the LSD discovery, where he formulated it and then just it sat on a shelf for 7 years, and then he had a dream or something that he should go revisit the research, and that was when he it fell onto his hand or something, and he got contact high from it and was like, "Whoa, what just happened?" Right.
Yep.
It's pretty, you can easily stumble over some of this stuff and not notice you've discovered anything at all. You could just think it's like an accident or something, or that something went wrong.
Definitely. Right. And I think that that's part of the danger of being very dogmatic. And, there is definitely something to discipline, right? I mean, I think we both think discipline is, for sure a useful skill to have, but then there's also, you need to leave room for, I guess, welcoming the unexpected too at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you gotta have enough of that mix to be able to take advantage of this stuff when it comes up while still allowing it to happen, but also continuing your work. I feel like you can't actually put a hard constraint on it. You just have to sort of, I don't know, try to keep an open mind. That's sort of what the whole book is about, is how do you foster that serendipitous mindset?
Right.
Which is actually, a lot of it kind of reminds me of Anti-Fragile, because Taleb talks about it in the book.
Definitely.
Right, where he says that a big part of maximizing upside while minimizing downside is sort of exposing yourself to potential serendipitous events. Or he mentions going to cocktail parties is a great example, because you might not meet anyone and then you've got a very small loss, but you might meet someone, who changes your life, and that could be a massive gain. Right. But you have to, one, open yourself up to the chance of that happening by being at the event. And then two, be able to recognize when you have met someone, right, that could have a meaningful impact on your life that you connect with. And that's a perfect example of trying to harness serendipity for your own benefit.
Right. Exactly. I got a lot of Anti-Fragile vibes from this as well. Yeah. I was actually going to say that one way that in this book, at least, they talked about these researchers doing that is so Fleming from penicillin again was a good example, where he didn't throw away his petri dishes right away. He was kind of messy.
Yeah.
And right. So his desk space and his lab weren't that orderly. Whereas, if he threw them away right away, he would have for sure never made this discovery. But it's kind of by letting that randomness happen. I think even the author said he would have a chance to look at every dish twice. Whether by design or not, who knows? But it was he would have a chance to look at it, obviously, when he needed to. But then the second time was when he was finally cleaning up his lab and would throw it away. He would get a chance to take a look again. And that's the second time is actually when the penicillin discovery happened. So there's something to be said for not being too orderly.
Yeah.
And not necessarily structuring your time in probably this is more applicable for all of us, not structuring your time in a life hacker, every minute of the day scheduled kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, so serendipity, it ends up being, I guess, the main theme for the whole book. And like we said before, he's sort of getting at how scientists can try to foster more serendipity in their lab work, and how we could change education and research grants and peer review and all of that to foster more of this serendipity. And I like the distinction he makes that, and this goes back to Thomas Kuhn's, I think it was an article on the theory or the structure of scientific revolutions, which is a really boring piece, and I don't recommend anyone read it. The gist is good enough. I took a philosophy of science class in college, and we had to read it, and it was painful. But anyway, Kuhn makes a distinction between normal and revolutionary science, right? Where normal science is researchers just working within the current paradigms and applying accumulated knowledge to existing defined problems, which he very dismissively refers to as puzzle solving. You're not really making much of any insight. You're just kind of figuring out small incremental improvements on the existing knowledge. In the startup world, you call it a 10% improvement, right? Or a 1 to n,
right?
In Peter Thiel's language. But then revolutionary science is the 0 to 1, new discovery, finding out something new where you break some of the old paradigms and you discover a completely new set of problems, right? This is the infinity generating discoveries that David Deutsch talked about in the beginning of Infinity. And I think what Meyers would say is that these revolutions in science come about largely from serendipitous events because it's so hard to break ourselves out of the puzzle solving mode. And so we need some kind of weird accident to happen and then, to be able to recognize it and take advantage of it in order for these revolutions to actually come about.
Well, and obviously he's talking about medicine here and science here, but I would actually say this applies to startups or, to a lot of like any kind of new paradigm shifting idea, right? Whether it's a startup idea too. I mean, you see a lot of startup ideas just come serendipitously or someone's trying to solve their own problem, right? It's like very rarely through like the corporate innovation departments at large companies coming up with the paradigm shifting ideas and new products.
Yeah. And even on a more micro level within a business, making marketing discoveries or something about users, or there are all these little things that happen, and a lot of it doesn't come from very systematically tracking and making inferences on the data as much as it just can jump out at you from what you're starting to think about, right? It can feel like that bolt from the blue, sudden realization, but a lot of that, I imagine, is also sort of a serendipitous realization of what's in front of you from thinking about it in a way that you haven't before, or you stumble on something or a story or find something in a related field and that makes you think about your field differently. There's all these little things that can happen in pretty much any area of life.
Right, exactly.
But it requires having that serendipity tuned mindset in order to fully take advantage of it.
And I think he also talked about how that's kind of like the intuitive way of thinking, right? There's sort of like the what was the first? There were like 3 different ones. It was like intuitive, creative, or imagination, and then there was a first one that was more like the linear one. Oh yeah, here it is. So it's reason, intuition, and imagination. And he sort of says that the intuition level is where it's sort of like the bridge between like logic and pure creativity that leads to like the biggest breakthroughs, which makes sense because we've talked about that before, about how like after you have a solid understanding of your field, if you can sort of still keep that open mind, you can come up with something that's really interesting. But there's almost like a level where if you have too much experience in a given field, you might not see the new thing because it's just hard to get out of the existing paradigm.
Yeah, exactly. And in some ways, that's the benefit of looking at multiple fields at once and not being too narrow, right?
Oh, 100%.
Because it opens you up to ideas from areas that you might not have thought about before.
Exactly.
And especially that other people in your field aren't thinking of.
Exactly. It's the advantage of living at the intersections instead of like in the actual field itself.
Right.
It's also an advantage of reading widely.
Yeah. Reading widely, looking at how other fields are doing the thing you're trying to do. I had one friend who does copywriting for websites, and he said he doesn't read any copywriting blogs. He just goes to the supermarket and looks at what magazines are doing. And he says that's way more helpful because there's so much shelf space and magazines have to compete so much to get attention on the shelf that they've really refined a lot of their copywriting and visual techniques in order to maximize that. And so he gets good ideas from looking at what magazines are doing for copy. It's kind of a cool example of that.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
That's really cool to see.
Now I think about it whenever I see a magazine. No, I can't help not thinking about it now.
Right. That's really smart though. That's like, because they've put in a lot of time and money and effort probably into perfecting that stuff. And if you can just piggyback on it, I mean, why reinvent the wheel for those kinds of things?
Exactly. That's probably why books like Boron Letters stand up so well, because those core principles of, copywriting, for example, apply across all fields. And this is kind of another place where he's talking about serendipity and serendipitous thinking as it applies to medicine and science. But as we're getting at, you can end up applying that to pretty much every field. It's really a way of thinking and operating, not just a way of doing science.
100%. Yeah. The whole first chapter is really I guess it's almost like an insight into how these scientists were thinking to lead to the discoveries that they got to. But it's less about the discoveries in the first chapter. It's much more about the way of thinking and the trying to, like, he used a word here. It's like analogical, right? Oh yeah, here it is. Analogical thinking, where he's talking about here's the quote.
Analogical thinking has certainly been a cornerstone of science.
Yeah. I thought it was higher up, actually. So I'm just going to read it from the book. So he's talking about how creative thinkers tend to take analogies and anomalies to higher levels. And then I'm going to skip a little bit. He says, indeed, it is the recognition of anomalies, discrepancies, inconsistencies, and exceptions that often leads to the uncovering of a truth, perhaps one of greater magnitude than the one originally pursued. And that's another common theme that we see throughout this book, as we'll get into, is often they start off looking for something and end up on a totally different path than they started with.
Right. And the biggest thing, too, is them kind of having the balls or insanity. It's hard to tell which one it is because there's a lot of narrative fallacy here, right?
Oh, of course. Yep.
These are only the stories of people who stumbled on something and pursued it and it worked out. There may be plenty of people who stumbled on things and pursued them and they went nowhere and they ended up wasting their life, right?
There probably are thousands.
Oh, yeah. Probably more of them, right? It's kind of like the startup graveyard.
Definitely more of them. Not even probably. Definitely.
So I think that's where it's hard to balance some of this because, it's not necessarily that you should always be looking for the meaning in random accidents that occur because probably 99.9% of those accidents don't lead anywhere interesting. But those 99.9% don't get written about in books on serendipitous events. Right. And that's, I think, the tricky thing with applying some of this advice is that there is a lot of narrative fallacy involved here, but they do still make very good stories.
Yeah, for sure.
And it is still useful to think about. You just got to hedge it, right?
Exactly. I think the other thing that's not, I guess that we should also mention is that all of these people, to me at least, seemed that they had enough independence to sort of decide what research path to follow. That didn't seem like there was someone, like from up high telling him you have to go this way. And actually, Fleming mentioned this as well in his Nobel Prize speech, where he said if he was working on a research team at the time that he made this discovery, he would have just ignored it because it didn't have anything to do with what he was working on.
Right.
And so, it's kind of like that part is serendipitous, but I think it also speaks to the value of being sort of a free agent. You sort of have the ability to go pursue these kinds of things if there is something that catches your eye, like some type of anomaly.
Yeah, well, that was a big part of what Meyers starts recommending towards the end of the book, that basically the existing structure for scientific research and funding and everything is almost counter to the ability for these serendipitous events to happen, which is a shame. And it's probably why you see a lot of these discoveries coming from people who, like you said, had that independence or they had some special situation that made it easier for them to, fall upon these new lines of thinking. I was surprised he didn't include Darwin in the book, but Darwin seems like a great example of it, right? Where his family was super well off and very into science. And so he could basically just, study mollusks for 8 years without too much concern for money. And then get sent off on a ship voyage because I think it was, what was it? His dad thought that he was, listless and not going anywhere in life.
Right.
And then that's what led to, him seeing the finches in the book Galapagos and all of that. That's a perfect example. Right. But I think if somebody had told him to go study finches in the Galapagos, probably wouldn't have had the same realization, right?
Right, exactly.
It's the constraints almost blind you to stuff outside of them, which can be harmful for making these kinds of discoveries.
Exactly. He had enough open space in his mind to actually, kind of want to go make those discoveries on his own. And I think you're right. The Darwin story would have been a good one to include here. Surprised he didn't. I guess it doesn't have anything to do with, directly have something to do with medicine, although it does have a lot to do with medicine later on.
Yeah, that's true. Most of this was about medicine, but
Yeah, but I mean, it would have been a good serendipity example. But oh well, I guess there were plenty of examples in this book anyway. Maybe ran out of space.
yeah, he had plenty of stuff to work with.
Yeah.
There were like 35 chapters on examples, right?
Yeah.
Because the way the book is structured is interesting. Is you got this long intro introducing the premise, and then you've got some 30 plus chapters. Each of them is a different example within a broader category. And then the conclusion of the book is kind of like the takeaways and what it should mean for how we think about science and research and education. So the middle of the book is very just like boom, 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 example, 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 example. They're fun stories, though. Some of them are very short and some are very long. It was an interesting way to structure the book.
Yeah, and some are shocking in how, like, the odds of them happening seems to be astronomically low.
Oh, yeah.
The penicillin one is the first. I mean, the penicillin one is just insane how that happened. It was like astronomically low multiplied by astronomically low multiplied by astronomically low.
Yeah, should we just, I mean, that's the first one. Should we just jump into that chapter?
Let's jump into it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so basically, the scientist, Alexander Fleming, believe he was in London, right? Or he was in the UK for sure.
Yeah, he was somewhere in Europe. I think London.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was London.
He was definitely British. So yeah, it might have been London or...
It says later down London.
Oh, yeah, because of that heat wave and the cool spell that happened.
The heat wave thing, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so this guy, he's a researcher in London. He, as we mentioned earlier, was a bit messy, didn't clean his petri dishes. I believe he was away for 2 to 3 weeks, right? He came back, he had his bench was crowded with 40 to 50 different dishes with different bacterial cultures. And as he was looking at one, he saw a mold, and there was a circular zone around the mold where there was no bacteria. So it had been dissolved or, sterilized in that section. So he got really intrigued by that. And apparently he was such a bad presenter that when he shared this discovery with people, nobody got excited, right? I believe that was, I think twice. Didn't he share the discovery and it just sort of like fell flat?
Yeah, no, I think he was like so unconfident or something that everyone just had like no reaction. And so I don't remember how he felt about that, whether he was super dismayed by it or if he was just like, oh, they don't understand. Because that was one of the big differences with some of the researchers. Some of them were like, oh, you don't understand. This is brilliant. Others like ended up writing themselves off. I don't think he wrote himself off, though.
Well, it said that he maintained the culture of the spores and of penicillin because, well, he didn't know it was penicillin at the time, but he maintained it because then it was like 7 years later, right? When that other researcher, Chain, I think was the last name, something like that. There was another researcher in the same area. This was I think it was 7 years later. It might have been 6, but I think it was 7. Realized that they were doing some research on different spores and their antibacterial potential. And they found out that this one was in the same building as them. So they decided to work with it and realized finally what they had on their hands. So that was serendipitous example number 2. And then number 3 was, I believe, for the scale up process, right? When they brought it to the US.
Before we even get to that, like the environmental factors that allowed the penicillin to exist at all.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the way it got on Fleming's petri dish, because he didn't put it there.
Right.
It was like a floor. They were doing something with penicillin mold on the floor below him, and the spores had to basically travel up the staircase, floating through the air, and then float into his lab, contaminate the petri dish, like literally as he is opening and closing it, a very brief period. And then it has to be one of the ones that's left there for the extended period. There was a heat wave in London, which allowed the spores to grow. There was a heat wave which would have prevented the spores to grow, but the heat wave broke on the day that Fleming opened the dish and the penicillin got into the petri dish. And then it was cool enough for the mold to actually grow and, have those antibacterial properties.
Right.
It's just crazy. It's like, one, he had to be in the same building as these people doing the penicillin research. 2, that the spores had to float up the stairs and get in his petri dish. And then 3, the weather had to break on the exact day that he was testing it, and then 4 it had to get left around over, it was like an Easter vacation or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And all of that is the only reason that this contamination happened in the first place. And then on top of that, he just doesn't get recognized for it for 7-8 years.
Yeah, they also said that he pitched it like the wrong way. He pitched it as a way to isolate bacterial colonies, right? So you could basically have, instead of having them all jammed up together, you could have you could use this to separate them out instead of pitching it as a drug. He was pitching it.
Yeah,
that was how he first pitched it. So, as you said,
he probably didn't realize that it was antibacterial.
Exactly,
right?
Or to the extent that it was antibacterial.
Yeah.
So I guess to reinforce your earlier point, there's definitely a lot of narrative fallacy that goes on here that he didn't even realize initially what he had. I think it took that second team to realize. Plus, you also have to admit that World War II played a big part in this, because that was a sort of they needed a lot of antibacterial agents at that point in time, which led to them trying to scale it up and then truly realizing what they had, which was a effectively antibacterial agent without pretty much any side effects.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, even the scale up story is crazy.
The scale up story is really cool too. Yeah.
The one with the moldy cantaloupe, moldy Mary.
Well, I was thinking of what was the corn syrup stuff?
Oh yeah, that's how it ended up in Peoria anyway, in the first place.
Yeah.
They were looking for a better growth medium, I think.
Yeah.
The corn steep liquor was a byproduct of some cornstarch or something like that. And one of the biggest factories for that was in Peoria, Illinois.
And they just happened to have basically fled there when World War II broke out. And so they were just in the exact right place where they found the thing that penicillin happened to thrive at growing in.
Right.
And to understand the scale of it, by 1944, the researchers left for the U.S. at the end of 1941. By 1944, Merck, Squibb, and Pfizer were producing 130 billion units of penicillin per month, enough to treat all 40,000 soldiers wounded in D-Day. But the number in the UK where they didn't have this corn syrup stuff was... It was it was in the tens of millions of units.
Right. It was way, way less.
It was something like 1/10,000th of as much output, because they didn't have this discovery. And so if the researchers hadn't ended up in basically this small town, Peoria, not a small town, but it's not New York City, right?
Right.
they never would have found this, and we would not have, or would have taken much longer to create penicillin on the scale that they were able to do so soon after, and which allowed them to really save so many more lives in World War II compared to how many died in World War I from infections.
Yep. And the moldy Mary story is great too, where the U.S. government was asking for people to turn in mold samples in hopes that they would find another similar treatment agent, right? That could be similarly as effective as penicillin. So people were bringing in different things. Labs were submitting different things. And this lady named Mary brought in a moldy cantaloupe that she found at some fruit market. And it turned out that that had the same, I guess, mold that produces penicillin, but just at a much better, had a much better yield than the one that they were currently using. So
it was over 100x the yield or something, right?
Also, what's wild is that lady was in Peoria too.
Yeah, she was in Peoria. She was working at the lab. She just went to a farmer's market and said, hey, this thing has mold on it, and brought it in. And that was the mold.
It's insane.
I don't know if they ever found a better one than that.
Yeah. I wonder if that had something to do with the fact that corn steep liquor thing was in that same town, that maybe there was some coevolution going on or something. I have no idea, but it just seems too much to be a coincidence. That's ridiculous. that particular cantaloupe.
Spooky.
Yeah.
It's aliens.
Aliens, that's what it is. It's the aquatic apes, man. That's what they are.
It's the aquatic apes, yeah. We had a great discussion of aliens and aquatic apes before this episode in the bonus material, which you can get at patreon.com/madeyouthink. For those of you who are not yet supporting the show. That was a fun bonus material.
That was really fun. And we were planning out potential future episodes.
Yeah, we're planning out potential future episodes, and we want feedback on some of it. So if you're not supporting the show yet, you should go check it out, because That was a great bit of bonus audio.
And just one example of what you can get on that Patreon page.
It is, yeah. There's plenty of other examples, but you'll have to stay tuned to find out all the other benefits.
All right, I think that's good on penicillin.
Yeah. Penicillin's one of the longest ones, I think, because it's just such a wild story, which is probably why Meyers opens the book with it.
Yeah.
It is particularly crazy.
Yeah, it's the perfect example of what he's talking about. Ulcers is the next one.
Yeah, which we talked about before in the Skin in the Game episode, because Taleb mentioned it as a perfect example of skin in the game.
This is literally skin in the game.
Oh, yeah, this is soul in the game.
So, yeah, exactly.
I mean, up until... or I don't have the date here in my notes, but up until sometime in the 90s, I mean, everyone thought that ulcers were caused by stress and spicy food. And so there was this diet called the Sippy diet, which is a very cute name, that prescribed people to basically feed themselves like multiple times a day on milk and cheese and cereals. And people would be on this diet for decades to try to cure their ulcers, and it basically just didn't work. It was the only thing that they had, and it just had a remarkably low rate of effectiveness. So, which it seems like somebody should have just said, you know, hey, why even prescribe this if it's not working?
Right. Exactly.
But I guess it didn't dissuade people. And so this guy, Marshall, is doing... what was he originally doing the research on? Where
let me pull it up here.
He started to see, I think he was doing something with like guinea pigs or rats, and he autopsied them, and then he was finding the bacteria in their stomachs along with the ulcer symptoms, and that was kind of a clue to him that there might be bacteria involved in the ulcers. It might not just be a stomach acid thing.
Yeah, he used, well, it said his first, I'm reading this from the book, Marshall's first indication that the bacteria were clinically relevant occurred in September 1981 when he treated a patient with severe abdominal discomfort caused by gastritis with tetracycline, an antibiotic. After 14 days of treatment, the gastritis cleared up. That was kind of his first clue on, I think, that there was a bacteria that was particularly involved in this.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. There was something he was doing before that was related.
Yeah, he was doing some kind of research because he had proved that one of the things that that Meyers comes back to a lot is that Robert Koch, who is the guy who established kind of the basis of bacteriology in modern medicine, he had these 3 conditions to prove causation. And it was that the organism must be shown to be constantly present in characteristic form and arrangement in the diseased tissue. Pure cultures of the organism must be obtained, and the pure culture must be shown to induce the disease experimentally. So what Marshall had found was that in autopsying these, I think they were definitely some sort of rodent, right? The bacteria that he suspected were causing ulcers were always there.
Right.
And he was able to obtain pure cultures of them from these autopsies, but he hadn't been able to prove that these bacteria could induce the disease experimentally. And so he just drank a bunch of them. He got himself tested to prove he had no bacteria inflammation, you know, in his stomach. And then he just drank a bunch of the bacteria that he had cultured from these autopsies. And sure enough, a week later, he started getting really bad ulcer symptoms. He did a gastroscopy, I think so.
That sounds about right.
Gastroscopy, maybe. And that kind of proved he had the acute gastritis and that the bacteria had established themselves in his stomach. And then he started treating himself with an antibiotic and his symptoms went away. So he gave himself ulcers and then cured them to prove that this was the answer, that it wasn't this like spicy food, stress, general upset thing. It was a bacteria causing them, and it could be cured with simple antibiotics.
Soul in the game.
Soul in the game, seriously. And now that's how we cure ulcers. You just take an antibiotic and you're good to go.
We should also mention that before that, there was a stat in here about the worldwide market for prescription ulcer medications before they figured out what was actually behind it. It was a class of drugs called acid inhibitors. And it was in 1992, sales were $6 billion a year. They were the world's biggest selling prescription drugs.
Wow.
So there was also a strong incentive not to do this research.
Oh, yeah.
If you were one of those companies.
through one of those companies, it's the last thing you want.
Yeah.
It's kind of like all the companies that make statins, which we'll come back to later.
Oh yeah, we'll get back to that.
But there's if you look at the history of it, the acceptable range for cholesterol has been going down and down and down and down. And that's mostly driven by these drug companies trying to create stricter and stricter ranges for acceptable cholesterol levels so that more people get prescribed statins.
Right. And you know what's wild about that is I feel like the statins thing is still not that well known.
Yeah.
And this book was written in 2007 and it was talking about this.
Well, I mean, to be fair, in 2007, I feel like people still thought statins were a good thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
I think that's... Yeah, because I mean, we'll get to it later, but the book is very pro-statins.
Yeah, things have changed a bit, I guess, since then.
Yeah, I feel like that the whole knowledge about cholesterol has really only...
Has the research changed?
I don't know. I feel like it has, because a lot of the papers that I read related to it came out in the 10s.
Right. That's a good point.
So some of that research would have come out after this.
Yeah, and also I think the dangers of the prescribed diets that were being given, that a lot of that has finally become in vogue recently.
Well, and I think the tricky thing with it too is that most of the stuff that Meyers says isn't wrong as we understand it now. It's just incomplete.
Right.
Right. Because, what he mentions is that a high fat diet can lead to high cholesterol and coronary artery disease. But what we kind of know now is that a high fat diet combined with a lot of refined carbohydrates can lead to significant LDL increases and increased cardiovascular risk and all of that. But it seems that a high fat diet without the refined carbohydrates does not carry the same risks.
And I think there was something he did mention about the LDL receptors though, right?
Right.
About how people without the sufficient, or I guess you can call it sufficient, people without the sufficient number of LDL receptors, in those instances, cholesterol led to, the cholesterol would stick to the walls of, here it is, blood vessels, which would disrupt the flow of blood to the heart and brain. But you're right. It's incomplete, the information that he gives here. It's not, it's like half right, but that it doesn't tell the whole story.
Yeah, but it definitely reflects the common thinking at the time.
For sure.
And also to your point, there are still a lot of people who I think that lowering their cholesterol is a good goal, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that I think is craziest is that if you look at a lot of just longitudinal, like cross-population studies on cholesterol and longevity, high cholesterol is actually one of the biggest predictors of longevity.
Yeah, there was something I saw 2 weeks ago about the potential link between higher levels of cholesterol, or I think it was low cholesterol, and like neurological diseases.
Yeah, well, neurological diseases and just all-cause mortality.
Right.
We're not, I don't think anybody's entirely sure why, but there's a pretty strong relationship between low cholesterol and earlier death.
Right.
Just from anything. Which is scary.
Yeah.
Because then you've got tens of millions of Americans taking drugs to lower their cholesterol because they think it's making them healthier.
But instead, it's potentially a risk factor for just early death.
Yeah. Well, I think especially for men too, it can really screw with your testosterone production. Because I think testosterone is made from cholesterol, or at least primarily from cholesterol.
Yeah, it's a precursor or something.
The cholesterol is a precursor for it?
I think so.
Something like that. So you need it to formulate it. I mean, honestly, we're gonna get back to this in the book, but I'm not surprised that Viagra became a huge necessary drug as the entire country shifted to a low-fat diet, right?
Right.
You take all of the testosterone precursors out of their diet, and then, you're going to need a pill to get it up because your testosterone is going to go through the floor.
Right, exactly. The example I've given on previous episodes is that, like, your body wouldn't naturally produce something that would just be completely harmful. There's, like, no way. Like, you can eat no dietary cholesterol and you'll still have cholesterol. So there's something, there's some value to it. There's got to be some, just like doesn't make any sense for it to be otherwise.
And something like a quarter or a third of your brain's energy comes from cholesterol too.
Yeah, there you go.
You need it for brain function and for sex hormone production. And those both seem like really good things.
They seem pretty important.
I want to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Two of the best things, actually, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know why you would not want to do that. I think I was talking about this with my brother the other day. there's something about that era of like the 1950s through like the 1980s that there's so many things that have come out of that, which now we know to be just completely idiotic.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but it's like the margarine era, right? It's like the
trans fats,
asbestos,
low fat diets, asbestos, cigarettes.
Yo, there's so many things.
I mean, there was a while where cigarettes were prescribed for people with coughs, right? Like, that was medicine. It's a weird era, but then it also makes me go, like, okay, well, what are we doing now?
That's exactly what the next part that I was going to say was, yeah.
Although I think we can answer that question. I think we can figure out some of them.
So before we go there, the one thing I was going to say is that time frame, the 50s through the 80s, for whatever reason, there was definitely, in my opinion, overly faithful reverence of science and like human ingenuity, I think.
Yeah.
It didn't seem, at least from the outside, obviously we didn't live during that time, so it's hard to blanket everybody with this opinion, but it didn't seem like there was much thinking of like paleo or ancestral, I guess, logic to how your body does the things that it does. And it just didn't seem like that was the frame of reference that people were using.
It could have been a Cold War, American super competence.
Right.
Like, we can solve all problems with science. We went to the moon. We can make better food. We can, make better everything through science. Like, it could have just been something like that. Like, that was the mentality. Whereas now that's shifted quite a bit, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, it just seems different.
What do you think those things are now that we're doing that we're going to look back on in 40 years and be like, oh God, that was so retarded?
Social media.
That's a good one.
Smartphones.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say smartphones necessarily. I would say the hunching.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see really bad effects from, because hunching, like, it wears down your vertebra and you can't grow that bone back, as I understand it. So if you do it too much, you can give yourself a permanent hunch that you can't really recover from except for surgery
or stem cells.
And I think we're going to see a lot of that issue. Yeah, I guess stem cells might be able to do it. Sitting, that one's not really new, but
I can see that.
I think the extended sitting will be a big one.
Yep.
Cars.
Yeah.
Cars is a good one.
But I think those, like, the big one that I could definitely see is, I don't know if this will necessarily ever be realized, but it does feel like, I don't know, social media is one of those things for sure.
I feel like there is a pull away from it now.
There is, for sure.
Where more people are moving into private communities instead of these public ones.
You're right.
I see a lot more people in, group chats, Facebook groups, Discord groups, Slack channels. Twitter is, plugging along because we all just, like yelling at each other on there. But the whole, like, oh, I'm just going to publicly share everything about my life, I feel like that is going to taper off.
Yeah. I mean, it's becoming a little old. I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Those are the big ones that I can see. I mean, do you think there's anything in the diet side? It depends what you mean. I guess it depends whose perspective you're talking about from, because if you think about the average American diet, then you could say all of it is fucked up.
All of it's screwed up. I'm worried about this carnivore diet thing. I feel like people are taking it too seriously.
Yeah, I haven't tried it and I don't know nearly enough about it. It just, I don't know, it doesn't seem complete, but could be wrong.
No, I mean, and the thing with the carnivore diet is that there's absolutely no research or tests or studies or anything to back up it having any benefits at all.
One of our friends tried it. What was his reaction?
Well, one, that it was super hard.
I believe that.
And he underate pretty dramatically. And I think he broke it early because he was going to like faint from undernourishment or something like that.
Seems like a good reason.
I just remember he like had to stop. He just couldn't eat enough meat to fulfill his caloric needs, which would definitely be a struggle.
Yeah.
Another friend of mine, though, has done it, and he reported really good effects. He did it for a whole month, and he seemed to really like it. But the feeling good is not a great indicator of a diet's effectiveness, because...
Well, it's too narrow of a time frame, too.
It's also, it's a very narrow time frame, but the example I was going to give is that if you are eating a standard American diet and then you switch to a vegetarian diet, you're probably going to feel really good, but It's mostly because you're cutting out the Shake Shack and the M&M. Well, actually, you can keep eating M&Ms, but you're cutting out the Shake Shack and the like pizza, maybe, if you're not eating cheese, and like you're cutting out a lot of this shit, but you're still most likely missing a ton of nutrients. So it's not necessarily good for you. It's just like less bad than other stuff.
Right. Which is why it's not a bad direction if you're moving from the standard American diet to go that way and then make a shift later.
Yeah, it's a start.
It's a start. Exactly.
The hard thing with a lot of these doing a diet for a short period like carnivore or keto and then saying that, oh my God, it was life-changing, is that effect might be coming from you not drinking alcohol for a month.
Right.
Like, I imagine if you just did that with your normal diet, you'd feel pretty good too. And I'm pretty skeptical that, I mean, actually, we know you can't get everything that you need from just eating meat. There's some like essential, I think, minerals that you don't really get much of from meat eating. I don't remember what they are though.
You can get vitamin C from meat eating, right?
Yeah, you can get most of the vitamins actually. I think it's stuff like, what is it? I'd have to look this up. I know I saw it at some point. But yeah, I mean, meat, if you eat like good grass-fed meat, actually has like most of the stuff that you need. But I think there's some things that it ends up lacking. You do have to eat a lot of it to get your vitamin C requirement, I think. But you can definitely survive on it because there are a few people who've been doing it for years. And
they're still alive, obviously.
They're still alive, yeah. But I don't think that'll ever become big, right? It's not going to be like smoking where everyone's on a carnivore diet.
Right.
It's going to be kind of a niche thing. Eating 3 times a day, that's one that's starting to go away, thankfully.
Yeah. I could definitely see that one being one of those, like, why do we need to do that?
Yeah. A small one that I notice is feeding dogs shitty food, right? Like, that's one that for some reason took longer than realizing that we were eating shitty food, because you can have you can know someone who eats super well themselves, but then is buying like Purina dog food, right, for their dogs and giving them greenies, right? Both of which are just like pure grain and are pretty terrible for them long term.
Yeah, that's one. I mean, it makes sense why that came later. At least I can see why it makes sense that it came later, but it's
the domain dependence.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe college and college debt. That could be one.
Ooh, that's a great one. I 100% agree with you on that.
Did you see all those stats, those graphs that I tweeted yesterday about college debt? Well, I didn't tweet them. Austin Allred tweeted them, and I retweeted them. But
well, I have not, but I need to.
They're just insane. It's like 50% of 50% of domestic debt right now is college debt or something.
Wow.
But yeah, I think that will be a great example of. It's not necessarily like a medicine thing, but it is definitely something we will look back on and be like, whoa, okay, that was kind of insane.
Do you think the whole educational model that we currently have will be looked at that way?
I hope so. I was actually having this conversation with Anthony yesterday, and Anthony, for reference, is the founder of Perfect Keto, one of the wonderful supporters of the show. And we were talking about how college is actually not that important, because like if you've got a really smart, independent thinking kid and you put them into a bad college, they can work around the system and, make of it what they can.
Yeah, they'll be okay, especially with the internet.
Yeah, they'll be fine, especially with the internet, right? They'll be fine. But if you have a kid in a really bad K through 12 program, that's actually much more dangerous.
Yeah.
Because they might just get locked into these really narrow ways of thinking and studying by the book and all of that. And so all of these efforts to, fix college and change college are nice and well-intentioned, but they're actually much less important than trying to fix K through 12, because like that's super, screwed up too. And I would never want to send my kids to public or most private schools, but you don't see as many people working on that problem, I feel. And I'm not sure how you best solve it.
It also feels much more controversial.
Does it?
Yeah.
Why does it feel more controversial? Just because fewer people are talking about it?
Exactly. Right. So I think like criticizing the college structure is pretty expected now. I think there's a lot of people who do that. So it's like, it doesn't feel very contrarian to say that. But then if you say like, I don't think that the K through 12 structure will exist in 20 years, that feels more counterintuitive and like, I don't know, it just feels like I'm taking a bigger risk when I say that.
Yeah. I feel like people look at you weird if you say you don't want to send your kids to public schools and stuff.
Right. Well,
they think you're like a weird homeschooler.
I was going to say there's probably a weird, they're viewing you like they're not sure what perspective you're coming from when you say that.
Yeah.
Like when you say, I don't want to send my kids to public school, they're like, oh, is this some elitist here who only wants to send his kid to a $50,000 a year private school? And your response will, I'm guessing, be that most of those are not sufficient either.
Yeah, exactly. Although it's not a bad second best option. I think the public school is definitely the worst option. The expensive private schools are a less bad option, but I think we just need to make a new school system. That seems like the best solution.
I would argue I would put both of those in a distant third to the last option that you said, which was come up with a new system.
Yeah.
So I wholeheartely agree with that. I would reverse the order. I would say public school would be slightly better than a expensive private school.
Really? Why?
Because at least you would get to interact with a very interesting set of people and get to build those skills if you were a smart kid already. I don't think that, I think you would need to get some type of education outside of school, whether that was through the internet or through your parents or something like that. But if you were able to learn to navigate a very interesting social environment at a public school, I just don't think there's a ton of value in the, I don't want a blanket statement, all expensive private schools, because there are some good ones out there.
Yeah.
But there are definitely a lot, at least I could say a lot of the ones in the DC area, because I know a lot of people that went to them, the expensive private schools. One thing that they definitely don't have comfort doing is speaking to a variety of different people. And that's not just from a race standpoint. It's more from a socioeconomic standpoint, less from a race standpoint. Because they do a good job, I would say, of having different races in there. But, you might have a lot, especially in DC, you'll have a lot of people who are like, especially the private schools, you'll be like, okay, this person works for an executive at a government contractor. This person works for their parents are, one of their parents is a senator. One of their parents is a congressperson. And yeah, they might all be different races, but effectively they're the same strata of society, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. This is going to sound bad because it's probably not politically correct, but I would rather send my kids to the school with all the rich people and have to teach them to interact with people from a different socioeconomic status outside of school than send them to the public school where they're interacting with like the all walks of life. And I say that primarily because once your kids are in the school system, who their peers are ends up being a much bigger influence on, how they develop and think and all of that than, what you do as a parent.
That's a good point.
And I think that trying to surround them, and I'm not saying like rich people are better. I'm saying the people who can get into a good private school are generally going to be smarter and more competent on average, which means they're probably not going to like be, well, okay, there's a lot of drugs in private school too. In general.
I was going to say the drug dealers in high school are some of the most interesting people you meet.
That too, yeah.
They're more entrepreneurial.
The kids doing the right drugs are probably like the coolest people there, and some of the smarter ones too.
The people selling.
But I think that you have a higher chance of your kid hanging out with other smart, motivated kids at a snooty private school than at a public school, and that would be my main concern.
I think that's 100% true. Yeah. My counterpoint would be that it's the type of smart is more of the rat race type smart, and that worries me.
That's fair.
Right. Of the the achievement mentality. Like, obviously I went to CMU, so I have that as well. But knowing where that leads, right? Like, I don't know if that's the best place to have be mentally. But that said, I think there's so many factors that go into this, because I think you could still have that mentality going to a public school too, and you could not have that mentality and be at a private school. So private and public is probably not the only barometer. I'm guessing it's just so hard to know from the outside. But I would just say most schools in general don't do a good job of that.
I was going to say, I actually also feel like my public schools were less socioeconomically diversified than my private school. Because when I went to public school in Northern Virginia, it's like one of the richest counties in the country, right? And so everyone was either like rich politician's son or rich Asian immigrant. Those are literally like the two, or rich lawyer's child, right? Like those were literally the three demographics. There was not much else.
Right.
And all of the people who could afford to live in that area went to the same public schools.
That's true, because it was all based on the neighborhood you lived in.
Yeah. At least at private school, Choate would pay for something like a quarter of the students each year to go there. So you'd have a lot of super competent people who grew up in very poor households, as well as, the uber rich like Thai royalty that all of their family, gets flown across the country to go to school there, right? You've got the whole spectrum.
Right.
And so I think that was actually more socioeconomically diverse.
That makes more sense, actually.
Yeah.
You get the best of both then. It's all hyper competent people.
You wouldn't get that in a local private school. I agree with that.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you would get some, but probably not as much. It'd be hard for like Sidwell Friends in DC to sponsor, poor students from rural Virginia to go to school there because they're not going to drive 2 hours each way to go to high school.
Right. Exactly. Because it's not a boarding school.
Yeah. It's not a boarding school. Yeah. So maybe that's the trick. You just send your kid to boarding school starting in kindergarten and they'll turn out great. And you only have to deal with them for like 6 years then. And then they're somebody else's problem.
There you go. That's a plan.
There we go. All right. I'll have to run that one by Cosette later, see how she feels.
That can be your backup plan too, starting your own school.
Yeah, if your kid's just like super shitty and annoying, you just send them to boarding school at kindergarten and you're good to go. You get your life back.
Yeah. I've heard that in the Bay Area, though, there's this dystopian thing that's happening where people live in these super expensive places and pay really high taxes for this school district. And then many of the people don't even send their kids to those schools, which is wild. It's like think about how in Northern Virginia, right? People pay a lot of times they're paying that price to live in those neighborhoods so they can send their kids to these schools.
Yeah.
It's effectively like paying for private school. Imagine doing that and then just being like, no, we're not going to actually send our kids to these schools that we paid a lot of money for.
That's kind of crazy.
We'll pay another $50K a year.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You got to get them into the best kindergarten in the area.
Exactly.
Right, where they have to take the entrance test.
Exactly.
Yeah, just got to burn that whole system down.
The mentality that's the opposite of serendipity there.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Back to the book. Good tangent. I think that was a solid 15-minute tangent at least. A+.
That's good. People get what they paid for.
Should we hop back in with leukemia?
Chemotherapy, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Let's hop back in with chemo. This one was pretty crazy, too. This was World War... Was it 1 or 2?
I want to say 2.
Oh, it was 2. It had to be 2. Because, so this shipping port in England got... Or I guess not England. Yeah, it was England. It was in the UK somewhere. Got bombed by the Axis powers. And all of these sailors who were... They were on the dock or something. It set on fire. They jumped into the water. And then they were swimming around in the water for a while. And when they got pulled out, everyone could smell garlic and their eyes were stinging and all of this. And it turned out they'd been swimming in a mix of water and mustard gas.
Sounds pretty shitty.
Yeah, super shitty. And a lot of them ended up dying over the next few days. They didn't sufficiently shower themselves off and change out of their clothes and all of that. And that kind of turned researchers on to the possibility of, they say here, alkylating agents such as nitrogen mustard cause marrow and lymphoid depletion, which led to their successful use in treating certain kinds of cancer. So they saw how these sailors were getting killed off by the mustard gas. They saw the mechanism by which it was happening. And then that gave them the clue that they could actually use it to target certain cancers in those places. And that basically started all of chemotherapy, which basically just means chemical therapy.
Right.
It's like just using something as a therapy, usually to treat a cancer. But mustard gas was basically the first one, or versions of it anyway.
Right, which is, started by bombing a ship.
Kind of wild. I think the funniest, or not, I guess not funny, but the one interesting thing about that too was how controversial it was at the time, because chemical weapons like mustard gas were illegal.
Right.
They were against the Geneva Convention. You couldn't use them in war because they were so terrible in World War I. And so when it turned out that all of these soldiers have been swimming around in mustard gas, it was a big deal. Okay, was that on the ships that got blown up? So the British had it and were going to use it? Were the Germans dropping it?
Right.
Where did it come from? Because it shouldn't have been there. And as I understood it from the book, everyone just kind of tried to cover this disaster up. It didn't get reported in the UK papers, didn't get reported in the US papers.
Right.
We only found out about it years after the war. And a lot of this research didn't happen for years too, because nobody knew about this event because it couldn't be publicized.
Right. And, my first reaction to that was the British must have had it on the ship.
Oh, yeah.
But then the other side of that could be the British didn't have it on the ship, that it was part of the bomb, and they just didn't want the Germans to find out that, they knew about it or something, or maybe they retaliated. Or, who knows? There might be other reasons for why they didn't want to publicize it. I'm surprised that Germans didn't talk about it. Well, maybe they wouldn't have known, right? I guess the British didn't report it.
Yeah, I think as long as the British didn't report it, the Germans would have had no idea.
Yeah.
And to be fair, there was some reason for the British to have mustard gas, because I think Churchill had given some warning to the Axis powers that if they used any chemical weapons, there would just be like a massive retaliatory strike against them.
Yeah, there was some game theory.
And so there was a little bit of kind of like not an arms race, but a mutually assured destruction with chemical weapons, where like nobody wanted to wish that upon their citizens, but everybody had to have some just in case.
Right. And as a deterrent, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good deterrent. So it's very possible they just had them hanging out there at the docks.
And they knew they were spies, so you couldn't be like, okay, we'll just tell them we have them, and hopefully they'll believe us. Right? You probably needed to actually have them.
Yeah, exactly. That would be the craziest thing if, like, 30 years into the Cold War, you find out that the Soviet Union doesn't actually have any nukes.
That would be amazing.
It's just been, like, fake the whole time.
That was my first theory for North Korea when they first started talking. It was, like, several years ago when they started talking about nukes. I was like, how are they going to develop nukes? This is North Korea. They're probably just bluffing.
Because we sold them to them.
Someone sold them?
Yeah, Clinton did.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
I don't think he sold them a functional nuke, but he sold them, like, some of the technology. Let me look it up.
For what purpose? Like, what would we get out of that?
All right. I'm immediately retracting what I said about Clinton helping them build nuclear reactors. So he struck that deal where, and you can listen to the full explanation of my investigation of this in the bonus material on Patreon. But Clinton had a deal going where he was going to give North Korea $5 billion and 2 light nuclear reactors. But the whole deal fell through. It never really came to fruition because it turned out North Korea was continuing to enrich uranium, which was in direct kind of contradiction with the deal. And so the whole thing got cut off when George W. Bush became president. So
never actually ended up happening.
And that is all. It was fake news. So be careful. And, this is why you can, hopefully trust us a little bit, is that we try to correct our fake news.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Somebody else called us out for fake news. Hold on. We got to go find it right now, because while we're on the fake news train, we got to... Oh, I remember what it was. The Google health trends. When did we talk about it? But we said in some episode that Google data could predict disease outbreaks and spreads and everything, and it turns out that is not true. That has been since falsified.
That was in one of the books we read, I think.
It was in Merchants of Doubt, maybe?
Let me see.
Was it that episode?
When did somebody tell you about this?
They posted it on the Patreon. So shout out to... Man, Patreon is really poorly organized for seeing what people have messaged you about. It's like hilariously poorly organized. Okay, here we go. The Google flu trends thing mentioned in episode 35 has been disproven. There was not further evidence that they could predict epidemics before they happened. So thank you, Bill May, for pointing that out. Episode 35 was... Let's see. Homo Deus.
Ah, interesting. Oh, I think that was definitely in the book.
I think it was in the book, yeah. So we got to send that to our buddy Yuval as well. Let him know that he made a mistake spreading fake news.
So I did find an article that they tried to do it for SARS and for influenza. I don't know if it worked, but there was an effort to do it, at least at Google.
Yeah.
It might not have worked, right? So that's probably what was disproven. They might have tried.
Yeah, it might have not worked. They might have gotten lucky once with influenza or something, and then they tried to generalize it, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
I believe that.
There was an article from this year, actually, like 3 months ago, talking about how Google can predict where syphilis outbreaks will happen.
Oh, interesting.
But I don't know, again, I don't know if it was actually done or if, like, from this article, it looks like they made, like, an announcement about it. But I don't know how accurately can be done. It's just from people Googling it.
Is this like still a thing in the US?
Apparently.
I'm sure nobody dies of it.
No, it's probably not as bad as it once. Like, I mean, from this book, they were even talking about syphilis.
Yeah. 28,000 cases in 2016. So not a lot.
Yeah, definitely not that much. But yeah, it said they were using search data to try to do that.
Interesting.
But in a 1 week time frame, there were 7,750 people who Googled it in a geographically similar area.
No.
That sounds like an outbreak to me.
It's funny. Sounds like an outbreak. Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like there was much more than that.
Well, because I guess for the first few weeks after you get it, the symptoms are pretty brutal. And then it just sort of hides in your body for 20 years until it kills you.
Yeah. Well, I think without antibiotics, right?
Yeah. But if you take an antibiotic at any time in those 20 years, it's gone. So
you're probably okay.
Yeah. It would be hard to imagine someone actually dying from it these days. It's like antibiotics in your meat.
Unless there's some antibiotic resistance. But even then.
Go get a burger and you've got antibiotics.
That's true. That's a good point.
It is.
Just go to McDonald's or something. There you go. You're done. No more syphilis.
There you go. There's your antibiotics. Cheaper than going to the doctor. You can get those fish antibiotics on Amazon.
Wait, really?
Oh, have you not seen this?
No.
If you go to Amazon and you search for aquarium antibiotics,
you can just buy them.
So it's for like if your fish are sick. But I mean, they're like the exact same antibiotics that we take ourselves. And there's just all these reviews of people saying like my fish had a really bad cough and these fish antibiotics like cleared it right up. The reviews are hilarious. I highly recommend.
First go to madeyouThinkPodcast.com/support, click on the Amazon link, and then go check out the review.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, okay, we got to get back to the book.
Yeah, I know.
We're on an exceptional tangent at this point.
So we went through chemotherapy.
We went through chemo. We've gotten through 3 of those 30 some chapters in the hour and a half we've been going now.
The leukemia one wasn't as interesting to me, even though like obviously it was a very strong, like it's a very bad disease and it was great that they were able to solve it. But it wasn't as like...
They kind of like discovered that folic acid was an important thing.
Right.
Let's skip down to the sex hormone one because I think that's the most interesting next one here. Yeah. That this guy was doing studies on the effects of castrating dogs. And he noticed that when he castrated them, certain like small tumors growths would recede. And so he developed this theory that some cancers were sex hormone induced or at least affected. And in particular, the sex related cancers like prostate cancer. And that gave him the idea to try using estrogen on men who had prostate cancer. And lo and behold, it was incredibly effective in slowing or even stopping the spread of those kinds of cancers, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Also a pretty interesting insight to be able to find that.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing in there that I didn't totally understand is it kind of says that like, you can't castrate a human as a medical treatment.
I mean, I guess you could, but people probably would just say, I'd rather not and choose to just let the cancer continue, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. I guess, I don't know, like, what would be worse, being on estrogen for the rest of your life or getting castrated?
Probably getting castrated. I think I could pretty solidly say getting castrated would be worse. Although it doesn't say what the other effects of the estrogen were.
Yeah, see, that's the thing.
Like, how much estrogen are we talking here?
Yeah, because I'm just thinking, would it be better to dramatically reduce your testosterone production, or would it be worse to pump up your estrogen to an unnatural level, right?
Yeah.
Because like I don't know which life would be preferable.
That's probably another experiment that probably will be very difficult for somebody to do.
Yeah, it's like you just can't do these tests anymore.
Yeah.
Anymore.
That's true.
Back in the day, man.
Back in the day before the FDA got involved. No.
before the FDA. It's like all those controversial wartime tests on prisoners, right?
Right.
It's like super fucked up and should not have been done, but we got good data from them.
Yeah. Yeah, like the Nazi tests too that they had done. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's probably the biggest example. And then was it Japan? I think the Japanese did a lot of super fucked up stuff to Chinese prisoners that we got medical data from as well.
We've done the same for like people in jail too.
Oh yeah, and like poor black people in certain areas around the U.S. So what was the? Actually, there was something with syphilis.
Yeah, there was
right?
something with syphilis. Yeah.
Didn't we just like give a whole bunch of poor people syphilis somewhere in the U.S. and to like see what would happen?
Yeah.
Am I making that up?
No, I don't think you are. I'm gonna look this up right now. We have a lot of lookups going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just searched syphilis U.S. government. The Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. God, that sounds so racist.
Oh, Jesus. That's an actual journal article title. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Holy shit. It ran for 40 years.
That's really bad.
So they tricked these poor people. They tricked poor rural African American men into thinking they were getting free healthcare when they were really testing to see who had syphilis and who didn't, and then just watching what happened over 40 years. Wow, this is so fucked up.
So this is where, like, I gotta say that, like, when everybody says, like, for any kind of conspiracy, like, I believe in this, like, because it makes sense.
Yeah.
That, like, when there's any kind of conspiracy, you gotta say, like, how were people able to keep it under wraps for so long? Like, this is one of those. How did it last for 40 years?
Oh, yeah. None of the men infected were ever told that they had the disease, and none were ever treated with penicillin even after the antibiotic was proven to successfully treat syphilis. The men were told they were being treated for bad blood.
The whistleblower didn't come out until 1972.
My God. Which is the year it ended.
It says, the victims of the study, all African American, included numerous men who died of syphilis, 40 wives who contracted the disease, and 19 children born with congenital syphilis.
Jesus.
That's really bad.
Wow. Yeah. That's fucked up.
But yeah, these are the kinds of studies which are not good. That was another, that's an interesting tangent, which maybe we can avoid going on the full tangent. But like, this point in time, was this also when like eugenics was becoming mainstream?
It would have been being discussed a lot because that overlapped with Nazi Germany.
Right.
Right. That was like a very eugenic movement.
Right.
I think there's also the social Darwinism era too. Right.
Exactly. So it was when that type of thinking was going more mainstream.
Yeah. So, again, it's super fucked up, but you can imagine that the scientists were not thinking of these test subjects as other people.
Right. They were just thinking about them as subhuman.
Like, that's probably how they rationalized it to themselves.
Yeah, which is
damn
wild.
Whew.
This is the dark underbelly of medicine.
Yeah, seriously, man. I wonder, I think there's anything like that going on right now.
I don't know. Probably. I don't want to say probably not.
Probably not in the U.S. It'd be hard to get away with.
Yeah, I could see something happening with prisoners though, like people in jail. Just you don't hear much about prisoners in jail, right? To really find out.
Well, yeah, there's some stuff with like drug testing on prisoners and poor people. I think that a lot of it doesn't get reported. I don't know. I might be spreading a conspiracy again.
Yeah, it's just...
I'm very sensitive to my fake news tendency after the Bill Clinton debacle 20 minutes ago. Sorry, Bill.
Well, maybe not so much in the U.S., but I think there's probably stuff going on in other countries, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And some other countries.
Russian gulags.
Yeah.
How long can you leave someone out in the Siberian cold?
And test how long they can survive.
Yeah. All right, let's skip ahead to the heart, because we are making very little headway here. And the first story...
Thalidomide is pretty interesting. We do that one first.
Oh, yeah, okay. Let's talk about thalidomide briefly.
So that was one where I think they were marketing it as a sedative, right, in Germany.
Yeah.
And they were marketing it throughout Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas.
Sedative and pain management, I think.
Yep. Sedative and pain management.
It was like an aspirin.
Right, and they said it was like a very mild, like not too many side effects, and it was basically just being widely distributed, and they apparently didn't do any testing on safety or effectiveness before starting to sell it. Was it sold in the US or not? I think he mentioned it was not sold in the US, right?
Yeah, so the US avoided most of the problems because we had set up
the FDA before this.
Like the early version of the FDA for something else that was in this book. I don't remember what the
I saw that
spark of it was.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I can find it. Yeah, okay. So there was a company that was marketing a sulfa drug for people, and to make it easily administratable for children, they created a sweet liquid form, and then they dissolved the drug in something called diethyl glycol, which is a solvent used to make antifreeze, and apparently it was toxic.
Oh, yeah, that's what...
Yeah, and it killed over 100 people, most of them children. So then FDR created, he signed into law the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which required safety tests before they could be marketed. Yeah,
and so I think that's how we avoided most of the thalidomide debacle. But
yeah,
pretty famously, it ended up kids were being born with crazy birth defects, like no arms or like missing their eyes, and really screwed up children from something in the drug.
Yep.
And so obviously crazy public health disaster, everything terrible. But then 32 years later, someone realized that since thalidomide operates by, or partially operated by, mildly inhibiting the growth of new blood vessels, it could actually be used to prevent tumor formation.
Which is amazing.
And so I think it still has a life now as a anti-cancer drug.
Yeah, I think so.
But dude, can you imagine going into your doctor and having cancer and then being like, all right, this is going to sound weird, but I want to give you thalidomide. If I hadn't read this book, I would be like, fuck no, man. I'm bad news.
I agree.
Hey, if it works.
Although I guess in their defense, the only effects seem to be on children, on like unborn children.
Yeah, it seemed like that was really the only major side effect, was that it inhibited fetus production.
Which is a huge side effect, of course.
Exactly. It's not a small deal. But
yeah, but I can see why if you're like, a 50-year-old and you're diagnosed with cancer, why it would actually probably be safer than some of the other cancer drugs that are out there. So
I don't know, though. If a drug is going to like destroy a child that would be born from your body, it's got to be doing something else to you that's pretty terrible. Now, granted, if you have cancer, all right, that's whatever it's doing is probably less bad than what the cancer will do to you. But are you familiar with what's it called? Oh, you know what? This might be the thing that we look back on being like, holy shit, that was insane. Oh gosh, what's it called? Accutane. There we go.
No.
Okay, so Accutane is this crazy acne drug for people who have really bad acne that doesn't respond to other drugs.
Is it a prescription acne drug?
It is a prescription acne drug. Now, this drug is so intense that you cannot drink alcohol on it. And if you're a woman, you're either required to be on birth control or required to get regular pregnancy tests, because if you have a child on it, it like seriously fucks up the child, right? So this is a drug that kids are taking because they have acne, and it does so much damage to their bodies in other ways that they literally like can't give birth.
Jeez.
Which seems incredibly insane.
Just for acne, basically? I know acne's not like...
Just for acne.
Wow.
Acne's not going to hurt you.
Right. Yeah, this seems like, what is it? It's like taking, I don't know, it's like using like a bulldozer to do something that like a hammer could do or something like that.
Yeah. Or like killing a fly with a shotgun.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and the acne treatment in general, I think, is insane. And most dermatologists are like making the world worse. Yeah. Because, I mean, when I was 13 or 14, I had pretty bad acne, and I got prescribed doxycycline, which is like a relatively potent antibiotic.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was on that for, I think, 2 years. It did jack shit for my acne.
Yep. Probably didn't do anything.
Oh, yeah. It did absolutely nothing. But, it's like, oh, well, the doctor said this is what I should do. And meanwhile, it was just like raping and pillaging my whole microbiome.
Yep.
So,
well, and not just your microbiome, but like, so the best research I was able to find about what people think really causes acne today is actually your skin microbiome. It's funny enough. So at Estee, one of the research things that people were looking into, and I think a lot of other companies are also looking into it, is actually how cleansers can increase the chance of you getting acne, because you're effectively killing.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah, you're killing everything else that's selectively competing for the niche that lives on your face.
Yeah.
And you're also removing all the oils that apparently have some anti-acne properties of their own. And instead, you're effectively creating this clear battleground for acne to come in and win.
Well, it's like latex gloves, right? They transmit way more bacteria than your hands, because your hands have a built-in defense system, whereas latex gloves are a perfectly sterile environment, right? Or, diet is such a big thing with it too, right? I mean, my friend had like really bad eczema for pretty much her entire life. And well, since she went through puberty, and got put on like steroids and pretty much everything under the sun for it. Nothing really did anything. She did a keto diet for a month, and it went away and didn't come back.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Like, that's the craziest part, is that even when she went back off keto, it pretty much stayed away. It came back like 10% of the extent it was before.
That makes me think it was some type of microbiome issue, right? Because your body changes, your microbiome changes with your diet pretty significantly.
Yeah, so it could have revitalized the biome.
Yep.
And then it was strong enough to stick around.
Yep.
That would make sense. I believe that.
I mean, it's a possibility for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. Like, it's crazy that they would prescribe steroids for something like that.
That's a really common prescription for eczema.
Jeez.
Well, because the theory on what it is an autoimmune disorder.
Right.
And so you prescribe like immune boosting steroids to help your body deal with it, I guess. And it kind of works, but you don't really want to be on steroids for your whole life.
It wouldn't be immune boosting. It would be immunocompromising, because autoimmune is your overactive.
Oh, is that how it works?
Yeah, well, autoimmune is overactive immune system.
Yeah, exactly. You need an immune compromising agent.
Yeah, which I wonder what other side effects that has. But yeah, it's amazing that her eczema went away with keto diet. But I can believe it for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. The body's cool, man.
The body's cool.
Body's very cool.
Deep dive. But the last thing I wanted to say about that was related to your shampoo, like you're not shampooing thing.
Oh, yeah.
That reminds me of the cleansing as well, because I mean, think about it. Ancestrally, people I don't think were using like a daily cleanser on their face.
No.
They're probably washing their face. I could see that.
Well, this is the thing with like mud and dirt too, is that I actually don't think you really need soaps to get rid of any of that, as long as you still have your natural body oils. Because I noticed this with Pepper, my dog, is that she can get decently muddy or dirty running around at the park, but then within a day or two, it's out of her fur. It doesn't stick around, right? And I think that that's just a function of like, that's what your body is meant to do, right? It's supposed to be able to handle that stuff. And I haven't used shampoo in 2 years now. And when I did the Spartan race a month ago, I was just covered in mud, right? Like everywhere.
If you want to see the pictures, go to Nat's Instagram page.
Yeah, exactly. They're great. And I debated using shampoo then. I was like, oh my God, my hair is so dirty. This is going to be insane. But I said, okay, like, let's just try rinsing without it first and see what happens. And it all just immediately came out, right? I'm not saying that it wouldn't have if I had been using shampoo regularly, but I feel like a lot of these assumptions just kind of go untested, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That you need a supplement to do something your body can do pretty well on its own.
Definitely. Anyway, another good tangent.
Lots of good tangents. I think we've actually done more tangents than book content today. We're like at 50-50.
Probably 50-50, yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to let us know what tangent ratio y'all like, so we can adjust accordingly. Yeah. We'll have a little stopwatch. I'm just like, oh, we haven't done enough tangents. We better think of something random. Just talk about aquatic apes and the blockchain more.
Some episodes we don't do any, so.
Yeah, that's true. We've had a few episodes where we don't do any tangents. They feel wrong.
Yeah.
They feel less natural.
People complain, but not really.
About the tangents or about the lack of... One person left us a negative review that we had too many tangents. I was like, what do you think you're getting?
Yeah. Did they really? I don't think I saw that one.
Yeah, it's one of our very few bad reviews on iTunes, is that we go on too many tangents and don't stick to the book.
That's like the point of the show.
Yeah, exactly. What exactly do you think you're signing up for?
Maybe we should add that to the show description. I don't think it's in there right now. Maybe we're false advertising.
Maybe. So people come in for the first time and then they're like, I came to learn about happy accidents, not about Bill Clinton myths and shampoo and
private schools,
Tuskegee scandal and private schools. Wow, yeah, we've had a lot of tangents.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the heart, because we're less than a quarter of the way through the examples. I think the biggest one here is the catheterization, which was insane, because I guess there was this thing where you couldn't really mess with the heart in a lot of medical disciplines in the early 1900s. It was considered like a sacred part of the body that you didn't want to do anything with. And this guy figured out that he could run a catheter into his heart in order for x-rays and stuff, and seeing the fluids running around to look for tumors or whatnot. And he couldn't test it because there were all these rules against doing anything with the heart. And so I'll just read this from the book. He gained the trust of the surgical nurse who provided access to the necessary instruments, right? So he couldn't get access to do these tests. But he, I guess, flirted with this nurse until she gave him access to the instruments.
Good move.
And she was so carried away by his vision that she volunteered herself to undergo the experiment. So he pretended to go along with her, and he strapped her down to the table in an operating room. And then when she wasn't looking, he anesthetized? I don't know how to pronounce this word. He, numbed his own left elbow crease and then exposed his own vein and manipulated a ureteral catheter 30 centimeters toward his heart. And so he gave himself a heart catheter to prove that it could work, which is pretty badass.
That's another soul in the game example.
Oh, yeah. Hardcore soul in the game. But this is the shitty thing, is that after this happened, everyone was so pissed at him for doing it that he basically got kicked out of doing surgery.
Yeah.
And so the only way he could keep doing this research was he would keep these dogs at his mom's house, go to his mom's house, knock the dogs out with morphine, stuff them in a potato sack, sneak them into the hospital, and then run catheters through them and inject dye into their heart and, watch it through the x-ray and see how it happened. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Just like the balls on this guy too. Just like like this whole story, right? I mean, he was clearly carried by some vision that he had to make this happen.
Yep. I also like the story where he was testing it. It was him or somebody who came after him was testing it on like a live person for one of the first times, and he accidentally injected 10 times as much dye as he should have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it stopped the guy's heart, but he was still conscious. And so the researcher just told him to cough, and then coughing was enough to restart his heart. It's like, okay.
That's wild.
That was almost really, really bad.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, well, the other thing on this chapter I loved, which I'm sure you were planning to get to, was the urology one, the American Urological Association meeting at the end.
I think that's actually in the next chapter. I think I mislabeled my headings because it doesn't.
Oh, you moved it up?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense in this chapter. I think it's got to be in the Viagra chapter.
Well, a catheter goes through your penis. It can.
Oh, you're right. You know what? That might be in the right place. Okay, I take it back. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think because, urologists are involved in catheters. I think they're probably the ones who do it mostly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm just going to read this from the book because there's no way to improve on this. The annual scientific meeting of the American Urological Association is usually a pretty staid affair.
Staid? I think staid.
I don't think I've ever said that out loud.
Yeah, there's a lot of hard words in this book.
Yeah. But one meeting has entered the annals of folklore. In the early 1980s, during the course of his lecture on the effectiveness of injecting substances directly into the penis to increase blood flow, one urologist announced that he had performed such injections on himself only an hour earlier. Stepping from behind the lectern, he dropped his trousers and proudly demonstrated to the audience his own erect manhood. Urologists who attended this meeting still shake their heads at the memory. That's amazing. That's got to be like one of the best presentations ever.
Oh, yeah.
And skin in the game.
Well, maybe too much skin in the game.
Maybe too much skin in the game, but
we don't want that much skin in the game. If you can walk that back a little bit.
I think Taleb missed an opportunity to include that example in his book.
That would be a great example.
I wonder if people still do self-experimentation. I bet they do.
They must.
It can't be like something that just stopped. I feel like that still happens.
Yeah.
All right. Are we moving on to Viagra?
Okay. So Viagra. Let's see. They were trying to treat angina, which is a very funny named affliction to have.
Yeah.
That's one of the things you probably giggle about it the first few times in med school. I would anyway.
I was going to say I'd probably giggle if I heard that word.
Yeah, just a little bit. But so they were developing this compound to try to treat it, and it wasn't really working on circulation and heart function. And so they altered the dose. And then instead of affecting circulation in the heart, it boosted blood flow to the penis. And so all of these impotent patients experienced restored penile erectile function, which is probably a very funny. Imagine being like one of those test subjects and like sitting on the table, taking this drug and being monitored, and you're just trying to hide a boner.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, this is really awkward.
Yeah, you're probably just embarrassed about it because you think that it's something like you might be the only one.
Yeah, I don't know what would make it funnier is if you had like a super attractive doctor administering the test or a super unattractive doctor administering the test.
Yeah.
Right?
Or if it was,
a super unattractive doctor.
Or I was going to say, or if it was like all male doctors and you were under the impression that you were straight and then you were just getting like just all guys in the room and you're just rock hard.
Yeah, and you're just like, I'm very confused right now. Did you give me a drug that changes my sexual preference?
Exactly.
It's a remarkable breakthrough. That would be hilarious if that was the first thing they concluded.
That would be amazing.
Oh my gosh. But the cool thing about this, or interesting thing about this too, is that up until the discovery of this drug, the term they used for erectile dysfunction was impotence.
Right.
Because they thought it was kind of like permanent. But now that they saw that, you could use a drug to cure it, it just became a dysfunction that you need a drug for.
Right.
This very, have you heard Words That Work by Frank Luntz?
No, but you've recommended it a couple times on the show.
This is a perfect example of it, how the way you phrase something has a huge impact on how you think about it, right? Like pro-life and pro-choice.
Yeah.
This is, impotence. Oh, I'm stuck this way. My penis is never going to work again. Erectile dysfunction is, it's just, it's like malfunctioning. I just need a little blue pill. I'm good to go.
Right, exactly. And then it makes it seem like something you need a drug for sure.
Exactly.
And then they can sell it to you. How convenient.
It's crazy. This stat is insane. Worldwide sales were $788 million in its first 9 months on the market in 1998.
Yeah, that's wild.
In 2004, up to 300,000 men were taking Viagra weekly.
I feel like the numbers are probably higher than that even.
Oh, it's got to be higher.
Like, I wonder if that's just US.
Yeah, let's see.
And I know there's a big black market for these things too.
Yeah.
Because, like, I have heard too that, what is it? Like, in Asia, I think they have, like, generic versions, effectively, that are, like, I think breaking copyright or patent rules. But they just, like, I mean, I heard that's rampant in China and India anyway. And they're just, like, widely available. So probably if you look at the actual drug and not the brand name, it's probably an order of magnitude higher than this, I would imagine. Just crazy.
I'm trying to find Viagra stats, and there's a CVS.com patient statistics page for it. And there's a 5 out of 5 rating. And the only description is it allows a 54-year-old to keep up with a 31-year-old exclamation point.
That's on the product page description?
No, these are patient reviews of the drug.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
1% of people taking it are women. I wonder why a woman would take Viagra.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Worth Googling, maybe? Let's see.
Huh.
Why would a woman
take Viagra?
Apparently it produces better arousal and sensation.
Oh, you know what? I've heard of that because, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? The clitoris is
blood flow.
Basically the penis. Do I have that right? Yeah. Or it's like the head of the penis. And so theoretically, if the drug increases blood flow to the penis, it should increase blood flow to at least some parts of the vaginal area. What's the whole area called? Because the vagina is the cavity. Anyway, either to the clitoris or
the pubic region,
parts of the vagina. You could see it increasing. Yeah, pelvic region. You could see it increasing arousal and probably, I would imagine, have some effect on orgasm strength too, right?
Probably. You're the one who wrote the book on this. You should know.
We have to look that up. But anyway, yeah, it says prescriptions have more than tripled in the last 10 years. So there are probably over 1 million men taking it weekly now. It's a lot.
Yeah. That is a subscription business if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, seriously. Talk about monthly recurring revenue.
Yeah.
Your biggest competitor is probably death.
Yeah.
Right?
Can you imagine saying that?
Netflix had...
They said sleep.
Yeah, they said sleep is their biggest competitor. It's just like, oof. It's a little too accurate and dystopian for my liking.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway, so
cholesterol.
That's Viagra. Cholesterol, we already talked about a decent amount.
Yeah, we went through some of this.
The one last thing that I wanted to mention here is that a lot of the interest in it started with this guy, Goffman, was studying it by inducing atherosclerosis in rabbits by feeding them a high cholesterol diet.
Right.
Despite the fact that rabbits are herbivorous and would never, ever eat a high cholesterol diet in nature.
Yeah.
I'm amazed that did not immediately disqualify his research. It's like, hey, let's feed this animal a ton of stuff that it would never eat in the wild. And then, oh my God, something weird happened to its body. Like, of course something weird happened.
Yeah, and we're going to use these results to make human recommendations. Like, that's just so dumb.
So wild.
I don't get, I mean, okay, I can see maybe why he could be like, okay, well, I don't have another animal to try this on, but then how do you take the results seriously?
Yeah, right?
Like, there's nothing common that the rabbit's diet would have with humans. Like, there's not, I don't know, like, they're not omnivores.
Yeah, they don't eat any meat, and humans can't eat most of the stuff rabbits eat.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, it's like, what are the commonalities? Like,
we can't eat grass.
Right.
Most uncooked plants we can't digest particularly well. We don't have our, what is it? The thing, like the spleen? Supposedly the spleen might have been used for digesting raw foods and it just kind of withered away as we cooked more.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I think that's right.
Maybe the appendix.
Or yeah, I think that's it. I think the appendix.
Oh, that's why it's like useless now, basically.
Yeah, it's one of those too.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the appendix. It's just the way you described the withering away that I mentioned the appendix.
No, I think it is. I'm looking at, I plugged that in, appendix and raw foods, and there's a bunch of stories about it. So I don't know if it's like solved, but it's a consideration.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I think we mostly touched on the cholesterol stuff. I was generally unhappy with this chapter. It felt outdated.
Yeah. It is a book being 11 years old.
But it was an interesting history of how we got to where we got to.
Yeah. Well, you could also, I actually liked seeing some of this. I liked reading this though, because it showed you where a lot of the confounding variables might have been in why this was the understanding.
Exactly. Well, and that's what I was thinking too, is that in reading it, it kind of makes sense that people thought this stuff.
Well, it also makes sense why they, or like, so like where the Korean and Chinese soldiers section.
Yeah.
There's like a huge confounding variable there, right? Because it's not just their diet that you have to take into account. You also have to take into account genetics and then also the other things that they're eating. Like we were talking about here with the processed sugars and just the lifestyle part too. We have to take that part into account as well. But yeah, the Chinese and Korean soldiers, like that was, it seemed like the only thing they were looking to make the comparison was, oh, the Americans eat these things. The Chinese don't eat these things. The Americans have this amount of, fat streaks in their coronary arteries.
Yeah.
And the Chinese don't. Therefore, it's the diet that's causing this. Like, it just seems like such a leap and simplistic argument.
Yeah, it was a pretty big causal leap.
Yeah, it's like that's one variable, but what about all the other variables that you got to look at?
Yeah, exactly. No. None of the other ones matter. It's just
this one.
It felt like confirmation bias.
Yes. Well, and it's also funny how not funny. It's interesting that they mentioned President Eisenhower's heart attack too, because I can totally see that going out, like blowing that whole thing out of proportion then and turning it into this like public health disaster.
Yeah.
For like kind of out of in a rushed and not well considered manner. Like kind of like one of those situations where it's like, we need to do something about this.
Yep. And then everyone's like freaking out because it's like, oh my God, the president could die of this thing. That means anybody can die of this thing. So we need to do something.
Right. Exactly. Which led to a generation of horrible health advice.
Yep. Good times.
Yep. Still, I mean, people still deal with that. I still think that's like most people, right? If we get outside of our bubble,
yeah,
most people still think like low fat equals good. And that's just not necessarily like at all true.
Well, and I think the biggest confounding problem is just how little nutrition research or how little nutrition education there is for doctors and how little ongoing education there is for doctors. Pretty much all of their ongoing education comes from pharmaceutical companies.
Right. Were we talking about this? Or maybe I was talking about it with my dad, but like doctors don't get very much nutritional training in school.
No, I think it's like one class in med school.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like one course and that's about it.
And that was back when they were in med school.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
And there's not that much incentive to update their own understanding afterwards because it's a fairly simple, like, oh, you have high cholesterol, I prescribe you this drug, like done, next patient. They're trying to get people in and out as fast as possible.
Right.
And basically all ongoing education comes from pamphlets that pharmaceutical companies send them to try to get them to sell their drugs.
Right. And a pharma company has no incentive to show you the answers to these kinds of things.
Yeah, exactly. They're not going to send you a pamphlet saying like, hey, you probably shouldn't prescribe that drug that we make billions a year on.
Right. Or doing things like, oh, you know, this eczema problem you have, like you could go on the keto diet and that might help. Like there's no reason for them to tell doctors about that. Because probably I would guess if your friend who you mentioned went to their dermatologist and mentioned that like, oh, I'm going on the keto diet because I've heard this can help clear up my eczema, the doctor probably would have laughed.
Right.
And been like, haha, no, that's not going to work.
The other factor I've heard too, which, you know, is a little more generous to doctors, is that a lot of doctors try to do that stuff and then patients never do it. And a lot of patients just want just give me the pill.
I could see that too.
Like patients don't want to work to fix their problems. And so doctors are just kind of like jaded.
I could see that too after like 20 years of doing that. And then like,
oh yeah. It's like, because you're probably giving annual checkups to the same people and they're coming in every year and they're still overweight or they're more overweight. And it's like, well, have you changed your diet? It's like, oh, I tried for a month and then, you know, like work. Right. And so I went back to eating poorly and it's like, all right, well, try again this year. Right.
Right.
And then when they say like, well, can I have, you know, gastric bypass surgery? Eventually you're just like, fuck it. Sure. Whatever. Like you're obviously not going to change your diet. So
right. So your trust in the patient to do what they need to do is pretty low.
Yeah. And then next time you have a patient who comes in and says like, oh yeah, I'll change my diet, I'll be good this year, you're probably like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Plus you don't make any kickbacks on that. You got to get those pharmaceutical kickbacks.
All the perks. Although I've heard there's less of those now, but they're still there.
Yeah, I think they're getting stricter about them, thankfully.
Yeah. Although they're definitely still there, but not as much.
Yeah. Incentives rule everything around me.
That should be a t-shirt.
It should be a t-shirt.
Are we on to psychiatric health?
Yeah, we can go into psychiatric health. I think the main thing here that I thought was particularly interesting was the LSD stuff.
Yeah.
Because that was like super crazy. I mean, first, like more skin in the game. He accidentally gets it on his skin or something, starts tripping out at work. It's like, holy shit, what happened? And so then he goes back and he figures out he must like gotten it on his skin or something. And so Hoffman takes the LSD he synthesized, and then he makes a 1/4 milligram of it. And like, to be clear, a normal, like a big dose of LSD would be like 300 micrograms. So
this is like
just over a tenth.
Yeah.
Just over a tenth of what he took. So he took literally like a super heroic dose. A heroic dose would be like maybe 500 micrograms. Like, that would be super aggressive, though. I've never heard of someone taking that much. Usually here in the 300 to 400 range. And so this guy took like 10x that as his baseline. So, and he never took it again after this.
I can see why.
I can see why. Yeah. I mean, he would have had, I imagine, complete ego death, like massive dissociative experience, probably crazy paranoia, everything.
I wonder how the rest of his life was after that. Like, did it spook him forever?
Good question. At those levels, you start to see some weird shit, right?
I bet there's a book about him.
Well, and I imagine how weird it would be being like the first person
to experience that.
Obviously, there's magic mushrooms and stuff, so people knew that hallucinogens existed, but to have taken the first LSD trip, right, and just be like, whoa, what was that? Where did I go? What were those voices? Like, those colors? That would be super strange.
Yeah. I wonder if he wrote about it after, too. Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know. The guy at Harvard who took up a lot of his research basically ended up going completely insane.
Oh, Timothy Leary?
Yeah, I think it was Leary. He did like over 100 deep acid trips, and then I think he eventually thought that like aliens were all around us. And I might be misremembering. It's like one of those people thought that, though.
Wow, the guy who so Albert Hoffman, he lived till 100. He was 102.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah, he was born in 1906, died in 2008.
Oh yeah, he just died 10 years ago. Yeah, he's got a book called LSD, My Problem Child.
I actually think we should cover that. That sounds awesome.
That would be cool. That'd be great. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. Apparently, he wrote to Steve Jobs to ask him to fund an LSD therapeutic research study.
I believe that. They kind of look like each other.
It said it is unknown if Steve Jobs responded.
Damn.
Wow, he was microdosing for the last 20 years of his life.
That's cool.
Yeah, it says 20 to 50 micrograms.
Wait, he was microdosing with 20 to 50?
That's what it says, yeah. At least on
Holy
Wikipedia.
shit.
At least on Wikipedia. Hey, man, if your baseline is 0.25...
Yeah, oh my God. Like, for context, I mean, 50 micrograms would be like what you take to go to a museum or to a concert.
Wow, so that was his microdose.
That was his daily dose. That is wild.
Is there a tolerance?
Yeah, so if you do a psychedelic dose, which is usually considered like 50 milligrams and up, maybe 75 or 50 micrograms and up, it doesn't really work the next few days. You have to recover for a bit.
So I wonder if there's some of that was going on too.
Yeah, he might have just been adjusted enough that he had basically sub-perceptual effects from 50 micrograms.
Whereas somebody doesn't do it normally.
Yeah, if you or I took 50 micrograms right now, we would be having a very different experience.
Yeah, maybe unable to record a podcast.
No, it would probably be a pretty good podcast. Like, I took roughly that amount once and just like went kayaking for a few hours.
Oh, nice.
And it was one of the most wonderful things I think I've ever done.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So you're still like functional on that much.
Yeah, it's still functional and you can talk to people and you're not paranoid. It's just like everything around you is beautiful and it looks like the water is breathing and you feel more connected with everyone. It's really nice.
Doing that in kayaking actually sounds really fun.
Oh, yeah. It's transcendent.
Made you think trip.
There we go.
In more ways than one.
We'll fly all of our Patreon supporters down to Austin and we can all take LSD and go kayaking.
What tier is that? That's like the $1,000 a month tier.
Yeah, exactly. That's the $100 a month tier. After you subscribe for 6 months, you get to join us for the made you think retreat.
Made you think trip? Literally. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, made you trip. There we
trip.
go. Good times. All right, jump into conclusion.
Yeah, let's do conclusion.
I think that what I really liked about this part is that he gets much more into the issues with modern science and how it is kind of antithetical to this process of serendipity and how a lot of our institutions almost penalize our ability to take advantage of it. I really liked what he, what he said about government contracts and grants.
Yeah.
Because if you're getting money to research a specific thing, you will be disincentivized from exploring stuff that deviates from that thing you're being paid to research.
Right, exactly.
And so you might find something interesting and curious, but then you'll say like, oh, well, I can't go explore that because that's not what I'm getting paid to do.
Right.
It's kind of like what we talked about in the beginning, right? If you're a free agent, then you can run down those rabbit holes. But if you're not, then you can't.
Exactly. Well, I guess he goes into this a little bit later, but the peer review process too.
Yeah, that was a big one too.
Yeah.
Because if you can only get published if a bunch of your peers, accept what's in your paper, then that encourages the orthodoxy puzzle solving that we talked about at the beginning. It doesn't encourage you to branch out and explore new areas.
Well, Nassim Taleb has talked about this, right? And I think in Skin in the Game, but also in other books where he was saying what was he saying? Like how close you are to the ground is kind of reflected by, or it's inverse to like how much what your peers' opinions are affect your actual career, right? Like he was saying a restaurant owner doesn't really care what other restaurant owners think of their restaurant. They look at what their customers care about.
Right.
And academia is kind of the flip side of that. Academia is you're kind of judged purely by your peers and less by other, like I guess the general public.
Yeah. And I mean, after hearing all of these stories there were a number of people in here who made these crazy discoveries and then were kind of like laughed at for 10, 15 years. And then, maybe eventually they won the Nobel Prize or something, but that would be pretty hard, like putting up with that kind of ostracism from your peers and community because they're uncomfortable with what your conclusions might mean for their own beliefs and their own research, right?
Well, even when Louis Pasteur became, I think he was head of some institute that France had, right? The medical institute or something.
Yeah.
It said that the constituent doctors were basically laughing at him and saying, where's his MD? Because he wasn't actually a doctor, he's a chemist.
Right.
And so, I mean, that was even after coming up with some of the most groundbreaking discoveries in medicine.
Yeah. You can see how it would really disincentivize you from kind of like even sharing some of your research, right?
Even if you found something interesting.
Yeah, even if you found something